Peter Klein, my friend, we used to work together on some projects. He's executive director of the Minnesota Climate Innovation Finance Authority, which was established by the 2023 legislature. So it's pretty new, they're getting going. And he has a long history of public finance. He's issued over $1 billion of bonds for various public and private projects. He was with the St. Paul Authority for 27 years, and he created 2 energy loan programs that are national models. The Trillion BTU Revolving Loan Fund and the MnCIFA have been highlighted by the U.S. Department of Energy and Lawrence Berkeley National Labs as examples of what every state should be doing to implement more energy-related projects. He is a recipient of several national awards, including the 2023 PACE National Lifetime Achievement Award, the first and only recipient of this recognition. So thanks for joining us tonight, Peter, and we'll let you go from there.
So I'm just going to introduce MnCIFA, talk about some of the areas that we're going to try to accomplish here at MnCIFA as far as additional funding, and then review the RFI, request for information, that we did send out, and show some of the results that we did receive. All right, so this just talks about Minnesota's climate objectives. So 100% by 2040. Minnesota has some of the most aggressive climate goals in the nation. They are aggressive, but that's the only way we're going to hit what we need to hit, is to be aggressive and start action right now. Actually, action yesterday as soon as we possibly can. So this was just generally, I put this slide in there just so people understand Minnesota is at the cutting edge of goals and reducing our effect on the climate. Some of the other areas that the state has been an advocate for is requiring utilities to reduce the consumption of existing users by 2.5% annually. And then the Natural Gas Innovation Act and trying to get distributed solar generated. This is just to show we're just one of those lines. There's an awful lot that happened in 2023, and we're just a small piece, but we're all going for the same direction, going for the same goals to meet the 2040 objectives of the state. So there were a lot of initiatives, and the Department of Commerce, that the Division of Energy Resources that I kind of sit around, that division has more than doubled just over the last year. Because of many of these line items that were approved by the 23 legislature. So the 23 legislature did allocate $45 million to the Minnesota Climate Innovation Finance Authority, creating it as well. And essentially we can fund anything that shows a reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. There isn't a standard like there is with the property assessed clean energy, but we do need to show that it is any project that we finance has a positive effect on the environment. Next. The other areas that our statute requires is that we need to show that at least 40% of the benefits of our activities flow through to environmental justice communities. That is defined in the statute in several different areas, primarily through income levels and racial definitions, language definitions. And let's see, any project in excess of $100,000 needs to be paying prevailing wage. Next page. So we need to come up with a strategic plan and an investment strategy. The deadline for us to do that is December 15th of this year. We're starting that at our meeting next week. We've contracted with a state agency called MAD, Management Analysis and Development. And they will be leading this process, this public process of how we come up with our strategic plan and investment strategy. The legislation also said that we need to collaborate with Department of Energy and the Environmental Protection Agency's GGRF funds. So most of you probably know Jigger Shaw on the left. On the right, Jigger was in town. There's Russ Stark from St. Paul, the mayor of St. Paul, Mayor Carter. And I'd like to show these slides, next slide, to show that they called Jigger Shaw the $400 billion man, but what MnCIFA is focused on is that first category, that $80 billion. And it used to be that you had to be on the bleeding edge of technology in order to qualify for those funds. But now you don't need to be on the bleeding edge. You can be just bread and butter energy projects like solar, like geothermal, even efficiencies, and qualify for part of the $80 billion if a state energy financing institution is involved. MnCIFA is a state energy financing institution. The trouble with the 80 billion is it's only 80 billion. And we've got New York, we've got a lot of big states that are going after the same dollars that we're going after. So we need to be aggressive. We need to put proposals in front of the Department of Energy as soon as we possibly can. Next page. This just is a slide that shows the focused areas that the Department of Energy would want the recipients to concentrate on. And so the last 3 of 3 there is community energy projects, including building decarbonization. We think that those are the areas that we're going to primarily focus on, but transportation is also an area that we have a few recommendations that we invest in. Next page. I'll go back. That's my favorite. Every year I have to go up to the North Shore and Oberg Lake there. Let's see. So our request for information was sent out in March, or February, and the deadline was March 15th, I believe. And so we did receive over 40 requests for information. The intent of that was to accumulate enough projects in certain areas to hit the $100 million minimum that the Department of Energy Loan Program Office requires. So we're accumulating suggested projects and trying to go forward to the Loan Program Office with applications. This is decarbonization of existing buildings and transportation. We're probably not going to play too much in distributed power generation other than resiliency hubs. So the CEFI, which State Energy Financing Institution, as I mentioned, the Loan Program Office minimum is $100 million to ask for. And they need 20% local support. And the CEFI, the State Energy Financing Institution, needs to have invested in the project. It comes with a fixed interest rate that's tied to the US Treasury T-bill rate for the similar term. So if you're looking for a 10-year loan, you need to look at the 10-year T-bill rate. and then add 0.375% onto that. Essentially, we're probably at the 5% interest rate for the 10, 15, maybe even 20-year financings. And as interest rates click down this year, we're hoping to bring those interest rates closer to 4%. They will go out to 30 years, but those are 30-year projects are nuclear plants or dams, those kinds of things. The projects that we're talking about are 20-year projects. And so the maximum term that we're going for is 20 years. The other part of the MnCIFA statute says that we can't fund any project for less than $250,000. So we're not going to be the direct lender to the homeowner that wants to install more efficient appliances, air source heat pumps, those kinds of investments. But we are going to be able to help to finance those. We just need an intermediary. We need to lend $1 million to an entity that will then go out and lend the $2,000 to $5,000 projects to the individual household. So this is a summary of what we did receive. So we did receive 12 responses for lending programs like I was just describing, that we would supply funds to some lending institution. We received comments from banks and from nonprofits, and then they would create this loan program that would focus on environmental justice communities. Large-scale solar, quite a few solar gardens that are focused on environmental justice communities. We also have a few that are just large-scale solar that aren't even, they're not even solar gardens. They're just large-scale that are going to be supplying energy to a factory, for instance. And we have large public entities that have expressed interest, and each of those entities has a need in excess of $1 billion. So the state of Minnesota and the University of Minnesota, the state, Minnesota State, so the other college campuses in Minnesota. And just in the metro area, we have large Minneapolis, St. Paul, Met Council, that we can aggregate funds. We did get a couple of geothermal projects. We actually have funded one of those projects. We've financed one project so far, and that was a geothermal. We had 2 comments, just general comments about advice on what we should be doing. And 1 transportation, so electrification of a fleet. And then 1 manufacturing facility that actually manufactures building panels. So super efficient building panels primarily for housing. I'll talk a little bit about the project that we did finance. It was a little bit ahead of our time, but the need was immediate. And so that is the Heights redevelopment. It's about 112 acres on the east side of St. Paul, the old Hillcrest golf course. And the intent of that development is to have over 1,000 units of affordable housing, 1 million square feet of light industrial, and 1,000 livable wage jobs, and to have it all a net zero development. Well, the only way to do that is to have a geothermal system that's run by solar, and to have every building out there maximize their solar capabilities. That's the direction it's going. Had we not stepped in, they would have been running natural gas pipes into the development. Right now, they are not running natural gas pipes. The roads are being constructed as we speak, and that's the time that the geothermal system pipes needed to be put in, along with the rest of the infrastructure like electric and sewer and water. So if we hadn't done that, made this move for $4.7 million, this would not have been a net zero development. It would have had not nearly as great of an impact on everybody. And I think that this project is going to be a national model. So for those reasons, we were able to step in and decided to finance that. Probably a little premature for us because we don't have our strategic plan, our investment strategy in place. But where there is a project that is serving a environmental justice community, we were willing to step in and accomplish that project. That is a lot of information, and I'm certainly open to questions.
Okay, people are going to raise their hands. Peter, would you like to call them? You have gallery view? Can you see it, or should one of us call on them?
Why don't you call them?
Okay, the first one up on my screen is Michael Overend. It's all yours. Everyone should try to limit their question to about a minute, and don't ask additional questions till others have had a chance, please. So go ahead, Michael.
Will do. Thank you. Great presentation, Peter. I'm from Two Harbors, and I think it's awesome that MnCIFA is doing what it's doing. It sounds like you're really nimble, and we were really supportive of setting this up through our organization this last year. So glad to see it's happening. I'm going to tell you that your story about Hillcrest is very exciting and positive. We have the Lincoln Park project in Duluth and the old Central High School development in Duluth that could both benefit from geothermal. And I just wanted to make sure that they're on your radar. I don't know what needs to happen, but let us know what we can do to help potentially bring that to your attention. Thank you.
You know, what I'd like to do with geothermal is my focus really is on trying to capture as much of that 80 billion from the Department of Energy Loan Program Office, as much of that as we possibly can in Minnesota. Just on a per capita basis, we ought to be receiving $1 billion of that. I'm telling you, the big states are going after it, and we just need to get hopping to capture our share. What I'd like to do, I'm not sure how feasible it is, but to accumulate a bunch of geothermal projects like the two that you just mentioned, accumulate a list, and then go to the loan program office for partial financing. So at this second, I'd like to describe the first loan program office project that I'm going to try to go after. And that is $150 million for solar on schools.
Oh.
And right now, Minnesota has a solar on schools program that funds like a 40 kW system on one school building in every district. And what I'm advocating is that we should be funding solar on every school building in every district. And so $150 million of solar projects that we are going to go to the loan program office for $100 million of lending capability. MnCIFA will fund that other $50 million. And we'll roll that out over a 3 to 5 year period. But essentially what MnCIFA is financing is the investment tax credit direct pay that the school districts would be getting. And we'll be able to rapidly revolve our funds. And in theory, we would not have to have more than $20 million out at any period of time. So essentially a $20 million cash investment by MnCIFA is going to accomplish $150 million of projects.
Okay,
And-
next up, Tim Nolan has his hand up for a long time and a couple others.
Go ahead.
Peter, I know you got all these responses, but if there was a project now, let's say a community project that wanted to make a request, can they, or they need to wait for the strategic plan? And if they can, what do they need to do that?
We do not need to wait for the strategic plan and investment strategy. We want to continue to receive ideas, receive project proposals. We put a deadline of March 15th because people need deadlines. If I didn't have April 15th as a deadline, I don't know when I'd ever file my taxes. So we put a deadline in, and we did receive over 40 responses. But since that time, we have received a handful of other responses, and those are just getting accumulated with the rest of proposals that we did receive. All responses are going to inform our board on what our strategic plan, investment strategy should be looking like. That process is really going to officially start next Wednesday, when the MAD agency. So we want to continue to receive suggestions, and every one of those is going to inform our board on what they should be doing in the development of our strategic plan. The MAD group is going to present to our board on Wednesday kind of a roadmap of how they see this public process rolling out over the next several months. Probably going to be at least a 4-month period of rolling this out and taking public comment. But working back from the December 15th deadline, we need to provide 30 days of public comment. And we also need to provide the governor and legislative leaders time to comment on the proposed strategic plan and investment strategy. So essentially, we really need to be done with our work sometime in September, to the majority of that, and then taking further comments after that. So keep the proposals coming, and everyone is just added to that list.
Brian Anderson is next.
Hi, thanks for taking my question. Looking forward to your strategic plan. I'm wondering if any of the following are in scope: utility, generation, transmission, and hard to decarbonize industries like cement manufacturing, steel manufacturing. I don't know if there's much going on in that regard in Minnesota, but just wondering if any of those are in scope for you.
Sure. On the first two, probably not, because the utilities are able to access, I showed that $400 billion, they're able to access other sections of that without the participation of a CEFI, of MnCIFA. So I don't know that we add any economic advantage in those first two comments or areas that you mentioned. However, in the last, we have meetings fairly often on decarbonizing the egg industry. So we've got ammonia, urea facility that we're looking at working with. Another one is cellulose capture. It produces recyclable, compostable, get rid of PFAs in food product that's already being produced in Europe. And they want to come to Minnesota and produce create their first factory. I did mention the super efficient building panels, and we're working with a battery manufacturer that's looking at creating a factory up on the Iron Range. To the extent that we can help solar manufacturers start to produce more solar here in Minnesota, definitely want to be doing that too. So the first couple categories, probably not so much, but definitely in the other one, what you actually mentioned, steel. And so green steel is something that we are trying to accomplish. So essentially providing the steel mills with renewable energy.
Okay,
Great.
our next two speakers are Anna Larson and Steve Firkins. Let's start with Anna.
Great. So, do you have success metrics defined for MnCIFA, or how will you know if you should declare the effort a success?
Well, that's part of the strategic plan that we're going to develop, and that should, those metrics, not sure exactly how they're going to look, but we're in the process of developing that. I guess when I look at it in the big picture, how much are we leveraging our $45 million? So we received $45 million from the state. What's the dollar volume of projects that we are able to accomplish? And I think that the solar on schools project is something that I would point to. If we only have to invest $20 million to accomplish $150 million of projects, that's a great leverage for our funds. Plus, our funds should be paid back within a 3 to 5 year period. So that just allows us to roll those funds that much quicker. So, but every year I have to produce a report that says the energy savings, the carbon that has been reduced, the jobs created. So that is a report that goes to the legislative leaders and the governor. And it's like February 1st or February 15th of every year that we'll have to have that produced.
Okay, Steve, you're up.
Oh, if a project received a bunch of used solar panels, refurbished used ones, could they use that as their down payment or their 20% of their equity into a project? I guess that's my question. Could that be utilized as a down payment? There's a lot of refurbished used solar panels out there, the first generation, and now they're moving into more efficient ones, but all the used ones are still good producing, and they could be recycled into communities, and could they use?
Okay, so I'm trying to understand what additional costs. So if you're getting the panels
If they get the panels for free,
for free, right?
and get donated, could they borrow the money to build the infrastructure and hook everything up without coming up with an additional?
Yeah, no, I think that we would be able to finance that. I think that's an idea that, trying to think of whether there's some warning that I can come up with. I'm not sure that I'm not coming up with anything, so I'm going to say I think we can do so.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, Robert is up, followed by Yoga.
Okay. Yeah, I have a quick question, Peter. Kind of complete disclosure to the whole group. I'm part of one of the community groups that put in for what we call the Justice 6 disadvantaged communities. And that's full disclosure. But I want to go a little bit more about your planning process regarding getting some of that low income, disadvantaged, Justice 40 types of community, and getting those dollars sort of out the door, because it appears that the federal funding, and I worked on the IRA, the IRA bill seems to be really, really geared toward pushing dollars into what I call our communities. What is your sort of strategy for allowing Minnesota to make its goals and also be attractive enough to the other funds, since they all seem to be having those similar kind of requirements?
So the EPA has three categories of funds in their $27 billion that they were allocated, right? And that they're allocating now to literally, I think it's 7 or 8 nonprofits for 20 billion of that. And then the 7 billion is for Solar for All. Solar for All, no ifs, ands, or buts, has to go to environmental justice communities. So we have several projects that are solar gardens that are going to supply energy to environmental justice communities. And we also have proposals from contractors to actually put roof mount installations on environmental justice community households. So on the Solar for All, that's the only use of funds that it can go to is environmental justice communities. On the other two buckets, the $6 billion CCIF and the 14 billion of MnCIF, anyhow, the $14 billion. So $14 billion went to 3 entities nationwide, and then they are going to or provide funds to sub-awardees like MnCIFA. Those also have a similar requirement of at least 40% of those funds need to go to environmental justice communities. At MnCIFA, that's our statutory floor. We're definitely going to be reaching for something higher, a much higher percentage than that 40%.
Okay, Yoka, you're up.
Thank you, Peter, for speaking with us. I'm wondering, with the amount of projects that you're handling, is MnCIFA currently hiring, and what's the expansion, I guess, strategy for MnCIFA, or do they just source from Department of Commerce? Would like your input on that.
Well, the Department of Commerce has it's just been a great help to me. And so between hiring and accounting and just actually it's commerce people that really were the key to going to the Environmental Protection Agency to request funding through the Solar for All, in which Department of Commerce received $62 million. And MnCIFA will receive some of those funds. I'm not sure exactly how many. To address your question on where we're going, as I see it, I've been talking with other green banks nationally that have been around a little bit longer, like NYCEEC, which is the New York NYCEEC group. They've got about a $40 million capitalization, and they have, I think, 20 employees. And so I'm envisioning MnCIFA to have about 20 individuals in the not too distant future. The hiring process really does need to ratchet up here. Now that we know where we're at with the federal funds, and we have our board in place, we have our bylaws in place, the time is now that it needs to start growing and filling in the gaps. As I just hired an administrative assistant about 2 weeks ago. So it's just the administrative assistant and myself. By the end of the year, I would imagine that the permanent executive director is going to be in this position. I came on this position and I said I'd come on for a year. And that by the end of this year, I will have stepped away. I put off retirement for this, and it's just a great opportunity that I couldn't say no to. So, but the intent is to have the board, which wasn't in place when they asked me to take this on, to actually have them go through and hire an executive director. But then you have like a chief operating officer, a chief investment officer, probably a controller / HR. And then we're going to have some loan officers as well as project developers. That's hopefully that's a big picture for answer for your question.
Yeah, with all the federal and state legislation, I'm sure it's quite a challenge for Department of Commerce and your agency just to find enough staff. Right now, there are no more questions, but so if you have your first question, get your hand up right now. Otherwise, we'll go to second question. So, okay, Michael Overend with a second one. Okay.
Sure. You've been hitting all of my pleasure center buttons in my brain, what you're talking about. So the solar for schools, we've been working on that up here in northern Minnesota really hard. And I'm curious, do you see any changes to the kind of the standard 40 kilowatt power model for that program? Are you thinking trying to get schools to gobble up bigger projects to make better use of this money? Because that's a tremendous amount of money that you're talking about.
The intent is to not limit projects to 40 kW. The intent is to maximize certainly that building's use and to maximize that. I understand that I'm going to be facing some headwinds from the utilities in that process, but we would like to maximize solar on every school building. And that's probably going to involve the investment in roof replacement, roof structural investments. So we have had meetings with the Department of Education. We have some funding that is for repairs, but they don't think that a repair to a roof so it's structurally sound to hold solar would meet that. So we're looking at other capabilities. But my general understanding is we've got at least $500 million of projects that could go forward. I'm just going after a third of that because I'm pretty dang confident that I'm going to be able to accomplish that. So this is just me dipping my toe into the loan program office water, see how the heck things are going, and getting that first accomplished. But we're running parallel paths with much larger projects. The state agencies, the state entities, and trying to go after the billion-dollar projects at the same time. But getting through this first go through with the loan program office, that should smooth the road for the rest of the applications.
Okay, we're getting close to the end. It's about 7:22. We have 8 more minutes. There's 2 hands up, Tim and Robert. Perhaps we have a third hand, but so Tim, why don't you take it away?
Quick question, Peter. Haven't you stated that under the umbrella of environmental justice communities that prisons are going to be targeted, specifically Stillwater Prison, because of its bad conditions?
You know, we've been talking with management and budget. So that's the state agency that oversees and owns all of the state real estate assets. They deal with each individual agency. And the 2 agencies that appear to be the most open to these kinds of investments, one is corrections and the other is transportation. And so corrections absolutely needs to be have significant investments. And so Stillwater Prison is something that the Minnesota Management and Budget is looking at being able to invest, and it's a significant amount. I don't know why $50 million is coming to mind, but it's like a $50 million investment. But when I'm talking with Minnesota State and their 56 or however many campuses, that's well over $1 billion of investments. Much of it, some of it's going to be solar, but a lot of it is just efficiency, replacing old, super inefficient boilers with geothermal perhaps, or air source heat pumps, those kinds of investments.
Okay, we're down to our last two questions, Robert and Brian. After the questions, I mean, Peter, you're welcome to stay or go, whatever you'd like to do. We will keep it open for chat for as long as people want to talk. So Robert, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, I just a quick question on the tax credits and how they're going to be working for places like prisons as well as for schools. Isn't there a way now, or who actually gets credit for the credits or receives the credits in instances like that in terms of work on a school building and putting it up? Where I'm getting to, and the second part of it is, especially in the environmental justice areas, we're looking at these programs as economic development stimulus for those communities. How are you gauging how effective in communities, so-called disadvantaged communities, justice for these communities, that those dollars are actually flowing to businesses and people who live in the community? Is that something that has been considered or talked about?
It is. So the investment tax credit flows through to the owner of the, if we're talking solar or geothermal, it flows through to the owner.
Owner of the system?
That's correct. So
Okay.
the legislation, the Inflation Reduction Act, had a part of that has direct pay. So when you used to not be able to take advantage of the investment tax credit if you were a nonprofit, if you're a government entity, now you can get a check from the IRS for that investment tax credit piece. If you're in an environmental justice community, you're probably going to get well, let me go to the base of investment tax credit is 30% if you're using prevailing wage, if you're paying prevailing wage. It's 30%. If you're in an environmental justice community, you're going to get another 10%. If you're in an area that has, within X radius of a closed coal plant, or if you're on polluted property, then you can get an extra 10%. If you're talking about housing for environmental justice community, and there are, I don't know if it's 80% or 60% of median income categories, anyhow, you can get an extra 20%. So ultimately, some of these projects are going to receive a 70% investment tax credit. But whoever is the owner of the system is eligible to be the recipient of those funds directly from the Internal Revenue Service.
Thank you.
Okay. And our last question, I think, is Brian. You're muted, Brian.
You mentioned transportation as being the other state agency besides corrections. What's possible there? Mass transit or I don't know, electric vehicle charging? Any programs that you envision being funded there?
I think what we're looking at is they own a lot of buildings throughout, and they probably have a lot of flat roofs. So I think a lot of it's solar related, but I'm quite certain that they have not made the energy efficiency investments that they should be either. So those things should be combined. I mean, we should maximize solar, but before we do that, we should stop wasting the energy on super inefficient equipment. So combining those investments is what we would be looking at doing. As far as fleet electrification, that's possible, but I think with MMB, we're really looking at decarbonizing the existing building stock.
And Debbie Nelson mentioned e-school buses, which I think is back to school districts. Anything in that area?
You know, I've talked with a few school bus companies and they would like to do that. I'm just not sure. I'm not sure whether they're going to be able to do that. We certainly are eligible to help accomplish that. We would be more than willing to. It's just the expense of one of those buses is just significantly more than a standard bus. So I'm not sure how many of the private school bus companies are going to be able to accomplish it. But, you know, if Met Council, where they just bought 20 electric buses, I think it was, from a company out in California. But, you know, if they worked with us and we could bring in federal funds, they could buy another 20 buses or, you know, a significant amount more and have a much better impact. So we're open to it. I don't have a proposal from any bus company yet. The one transportation in that summary of the responses that we received, that was from our car. So the rental car group in the metro area was looking at electrifying some of their cars.
Yeah, I think electric school buses actually probably have a total cost of ownership lower than diesel. So from a replacement standpoint, looking at the entire vehicle life cycle, it's probably cost competitive, if not better. So hopefully more school districts look at that.
Okay, at this point, I just want to note that we reached the 7:30 mark. So people are welcome to stay around or leave as their schedule demands. I think we should give Peter a huge hand. I mean, to take time to do this and to step in to get the agency going before he retires, it's pretty cool. So,
Yeah.
thank you, Peter.
Hey, we do appreciate it. Peter, I just have one question. Last one. Any anaerobic digesters in your come up or any notion of anything like that?
You know, you're talking to somebody who funded the study of at least a dozen anaerobic digesters throughout the state. Only accomplished one. And the economics were tough. However, I do have a couple of projects that are looking at anaerobic digestion. So that one of them is capturing the cellulose from the sugar beet manufacturer.
Sugar beet.
They'll capture that cellulose and then its effluent can go into a digester as well as the wastewater stream from the sugar beet factory. There's a lot of energy in sugar beet and the wastewater there. So that's one. There's a couple of other digesters. So Ramsey County, Washington County are separating organics out. They have a project proposed in Shakopee, you know, Scotts County somewhere. So I was in a conversation with that entity that would own it. The trouble with the digesters is apparently the tax credit, they're eligible for the investment tax credit, but only through this year. So they need to have a shovel in the ground this year in order to be eligible for the investment tax credit. Without the investment tax credit, the economics are really tough on digesters.
Yeah, okay, thank you. What very quickly though, with regard to those digesters, I'm still there. Anything come up with are they the type that are actually using methane reforming steam as a power source, creating that? Is that the direction that, especially the one in Scott County, is that direction that they went?
I don't think so. I think that most of them were looking at cleaning the gas. Yeah, they were working with the utility there, cleaning the gas and blending it in with the natural gas.
Okay. Okay.
All right, I'm gonna have to go. So
Yeah, thank you.
great to meet with all you, and thank you for
Thank you for
doing
your
what
time.
you guys do. We're
Yeah,
in this battle together and we're gonna win it.
well, we're here to help you.
Okay.
Thank
I
you,
know.
thank you.
Thanks.